There's been a lot of optimism tonight, and I'm certainly in the same camp as well, but I really want us to return to some of the grand challenges we're facing. And I don't know if you, like me, had some problems getting into this building today. Some people perhaps have a little bit too easy to get out of this room. And let's just, for the moment, shut the door. And let's just assume that we cannot get out of this quite famous delegates hall here. This is our spaceship. This is Earth. What would happen if we really got stuck in this room? Well, some of us might be running to the bar and snatching the water because there's just a finite amount in this room. Some of us might run over there and just snatch the last calories that are in place because, you know, we need to prepare for a few days stuck in this operating space. Or will we perhaps start sharing with each other in a just and fair way the remaining ecological space in this room? Or will we have coalitions building up and perhaps even conflict arising? That is the world of today. The fact that we are in this spaceship. And you know, that was pointed out by Kenneth Boulding early in 1966. He's an economist, and you remember all his famous statement that, you know, if you believe in infinite economic growth on a finite planet, you're either an idiot or an economist. And he was an economist himself. And I just want to put that on the table that, you know, what we're facing over the next 34 years is nothing less than the enormous challenge of the recognition that we're starting to hit the ceiling of a finite space on Earth with regards not only to a carbon budget, not only in terms of fresh water, but also in terms of nitrogen, phosphorus, biodiversity, land, air pollution, chemicals, all the planetary boundaries that we've been defining, even quantitatively. And as Jeff Sachs points out very eloquently, you know, the world in the General Assembly is aspiring to eradicate poverty, eradicate hunger, and that is at the heart of the EAT agenda. But it doesn't add up today to also staying within a safe operating space. In fact, today we're putting the hint in the sand because we're not in any way coming close to being able to feed humanity in a sustainable way on the trajectories we're following. I share Gunhild's conclusion that it can be done, but it's certainly not an easy ride to produce food to 9 billion people within 2 degrees Celsius, under 4,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water, which is actually a point where we're already approaching today, and on the other boundaries. So I just want us to humbly recognize that we're really facing a new revolution, a doubly green revolution, which has to be both sustainable, but also in terms of productivity. Now, that is at the heart of the EAT agenda. What I, just to close with, what we, sustainability scientists, found so incredibly inspiring with the EAT initiative was that, you know, we've been struggling as environmental scientists for decades to try and make our voice heard in terms of the virtue and necessity and benefits of a transition to sustainable food production. In vain, to a large extent, despite the enormous success of the CJR system. But, you know, what one recognizes is that when one sits down with the health community, the top scientists from everything from public health, nutrition, non-communicable diseases, will recognize that this is what touches the heart of individuals. This is what really makes people engaged and change behavior. So, a bit egoistically, we found, my goodness, EAT is actually opening up a new vector for action towards a prosperous future for humanity on Earth by combining the communities of health and sustainability, which have not worked together. So academically, EAT is an enormous opportunity to find new avenues also for behavioral change, apart from all the solutions that we've been discussing tonight. So this is a bit of the summary of the agenda and challenge we're facing for EAT in the future.
And on those ecological boundaries, you do like to talk about what's your guess, worst case scenario, of the first New York Times headline illustrating that we've bumped up against one? Do you think it's going to be water? Or do we already have that headline?
Well, I would perhaps surprise you by saying that the top headline, which is the most urgent one, is the fact that we are approaching a tipping point with regards to loss of biodiversity in the world. Mm-hmm. The fact that we are at a point where United Kingdom secretly sends scientists to steal bumblebees from Sweden because they have knocked out the pollinators in the modern agriculture in the UK through overuse of pesticides, which, by the way, created a diplomatic crisis at the foreign ministry level between the UK and Sweden a couple of years back, is a recognition of the fact that we are at a point where we are losing the ecological functions that keep landscapes productive. The reason why this is the most urgent one is, of course, that a species loss cannot be reinstated. But the second headline is clearly freshwater, because freshwater is the number one victim of climate change. So what we see in terms of droughts, floods, extreme events, which hits local communities with regards to food production first and foremost, is the number two. So these would be, I think, the frontline issues.
Frank, I'm going to skip over you. Sam Kass, director of the Obama administration, played a mean center field, right, in college. That's baseball for you non-Americans, right? Hot hand in the kitchen, everybody knows that. Obesity, why kids? Why have you focused on kids? And tell us what you've accomplished in your time in the White House working on the Let's Move.
That's a lot. Why kids and why obesity? I think we really wanted to focus on the health of the nation. And the First Lady really wanted to make sure we were building a platform that would really resonate with a broad sector of the population. And obviously, most parents are dealing with and grappling with the health of their kids. It also is very hard to be against childhood obesity and wanting to not help kids live healthy lives. So politically, it was I think strategically the right place to start. Also, if you just look at the data, your ability to have an impact on long-term outcomes is much greater when you are working at a young age. And so when you put all that together, it made a lot of sense, and I think we're seeing some extraordinary results in a relatively short amount of time. Obviously, a lot more work to do, but from schools overhauling school nutrition, we have about 14,000 childcare centers that are overhauling what they're doing. Private sector stepping up in major ways. A real comprehensive approach is obviously what has been iterated, and I think is absolutely true if we're going to actually solve a lot of these problems.
I wrote a little bit about the demise of the home economic system in this country where girls, but also boys, were taught how to shop, how to cook, how to be mindful of food that's gone. And when they kids walk into sort of some of the community gardens that you've sort of helped develop, and you see that kid get so excited over a radish, and they go home to their parents and get them excited over strawberries and radishes. And then, of course, they go in the grocery store, and they're either not there in so many communities or they're more expensive. But that's what really gets me about kids, is that the potential of sort of turning that next generation is so huge. Right?
Yeah, I would just say I think the one thing that I found to be missing tonight is understanding this as a cultural challenge. And we get all the science and all the alarm, but in terms of actually what are we going to do to change, it goes to the very root of our culture. And food, obviously, is one of the greatest expressions of who we are. It makes it a very complex subject to tackle when you're trying to change, but also is one of the best vehicles we can to impact a lot of these other things that I think we've been addressing and identifying. And that speaks to opportunities in also the positive side of food. And it can be a delicious revolution. And guiding people in that regard, I think, is going to be critical if you actually want to start making progress and looking at what strategies are really going to work. And kids are the next generation, right? So it's an obvious place to go.
Shawn Baker, Director of Nutrition for the Gates Foundation. I mean, do I have this right that on one hand, obesity, kids getting too much calorie, and hunger, on the other hand, are actually quite related in the sense that they're both stemming from malnutrition, people not getting enough of food that will make them healthy? And if so, is that working for your work, especially looking overseas in nutrition?
Certainly, we're facing a crisis of a double crisis, but people think it's sort of two separate crises, and they're in fact very interlinked. Justin, people mentioned some of the statistics here, so where I get obsessed about this is 3.1 million children die every year because of undernutrition. And those who do survive undernutrition, in fact, suffer long-term consequences in terms of restricted physical growth, restricted cognition. And I think it's very clear now. The evidence is that the crucial period are the 1,000 days. So from the inception through the first 2 years of life. And for those of us focused on the undernutrition side, we focus very much on how critical it is to intervene then. But it's also increasingly clear that intervening at that point to get good nutrition in the first 1,000 days is good nutrition, be it for undernutrition or overweight and obesity. And if we miss that window of opportunity, we've really put kids on a very, very negative trajectory. Because when children are also stunted, have compromised growth, during that period of time and go on to obesogenic diets, it really greatly exacerbates the situation.
By the way, panel members, feel free to jump in if you have a question. Don't necessarily wait for me. Frank Rijberman, CEO of SIGIAR, which is the consultative group of international agricultural research. 9 billion people in one hand, crops that farmers can grow on the other. How do those two meet? And I'm kind of thinking about yields here. Is that something you've been working on?
For about 45 years or so.
Tell us.
So the CGIAR is associated with the Green Revolution way back when.
Yeah.
So those 9 billion people and the food shortage doesn't necessarily scare us. Now, Johan told us about the challenges, and I'm not sure whether that's because, we all know there's not a lot of light in Sweden in the winter and there's a lot of depressed people there. I tend to be more glasses half full. Sure. I know there's more than that to it. I'm joking. But while the CGIAR is for a long time focused on yield increases, and we still do, I think why I'm so excited about EAT and why we were earlier in the day here launching the Global Alliance on Climate Smart Agriculture is that we also have come to the realization, not yesterday, but for quite a few years now, that all these things are indeed related. Agriculture and health and resilience absolutely have to come together.
Right.
Sure, we will still come up with new varieties of rice. Like right now, millions of farmers are using scuba rice that can be underwater for 2 weeks and still survive. And we're at the total other end of the business than Bertrand Cousins. She deals with today's and tomorrow's crisis. That scuba rice that farmers get now, people have been working on that for 20 years. Imagine that. 20 years ago, some scientists started to work on that stuff. It takes 20 years to develop these new varieties. So there is also these very long-term, non-sexy issues of agriculture that nobody really is interested in because people are so much more excited about food because it's so much closer to people. So yes, I think that it's very important to link food and health and agriculture and resilience, and that goal of EAT is super important. We think so because the real solution to get sustainable, healthy food to people, to 9 billion people, will be systemic because there are those planetary boundaries, there are the challenges of nutrition. We have to tackle these things together. It will require still new crops, but also healthy landscapes, also figuring out how to put trees back into fields, figuring out how we can make crops not just higher producing but healthy, not just rice and wheat, but also sorghum and millet, these almost forgotten crops which are super good indeed. They're sustainable, they're climate resilient, and they're healthy. So we have to think about food differently. I know that because my wife at home happens to be a vegetarian, so she's working on me every day on the lifestyle change. I'm now 80% vegetarian. So the plant-based diet. Actually, coming to EAT, my wife came with me because it was the first meeting that she wanted to come to. All the other meetings I go to, she thinks, boring. EAT, that really excited her. She was excited to see that cooks and scientists and politicians and business can come together for a solution. So yes.
My 15-year-old is making up for it. He was a vegetarian his entire life for some reason. He's just started eating meat. So he must be just trying to balance that out somehow. Go figure. Johan, you were going to ask something.
No, I mean, just so it's for the record, I mean, my glass is also half full. Even right now, it's empty, I see. But the point is that, I mean, you've shown, Frank, that in Africa, we could not only double, but probably triple, even quadruple yield levels, which would take Africa right into a trajectory towards the opportunity for prosperity. But it really requires that Africa increases its use of both carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, land, and water, which means that other regions that are overusing today have to reduce in order to share within an operating space. And that is what I would call framed creativity for innovation, rather than blindly believing that you can go off in that direction endlessly, you can go off in that direction endlessly without ever having things add up. That's my only point.
So what I love about climate smart agriculture, if I may say, is in the other meeting that I was in earlier, we talked about triple wins. We still need development for those poor farmers that are hungry and need better income. But those same farmers need more climate resilience. And why can't we do that in landscapes that are low carbon? You know, farmers are excellent ecosystem managers, and there's no real reason why they can't have conservation agriculture, evergreen agriculture with trees in their maize fields. So we can, I believe, have the triple wins of development and climate adaptation, climate resilience, and climate mitigation or low carbon. That's what we really go for. That is what has to happen at scale of millions with creative new partnerships using links to business and NGOs and governance.
What's really interesting, the challenge you see in this country, I've been spending a lot of time in Nebraska for a piece I'm working that's related to the meat industry. And I was mentioning to Sam earlier, I was struck by how conservative, moss-back ranchers are hugely upset at their neighbors because they are essentially leveling the land, which wasn't all that hilly to begin with in Nebraska, to plant corn in every gully, ditch, corner they can because of high corn prices. And it's not all going to feed for cattle and other livestock. There seem to be ethanol plants on every corner in Nebraska, but they themselves are hugely upset at the impact that's having on Nebraska, both in terms of the runoff and the sucking of the groundwater underneath. So you don't have to go very far to see a huge sort of issue in terms of farmers and what drives them to plant what. Olaf Scherven, Director of Public Partnerships at UNICEF, and I stumbled over the public because my wife works in global health issues, trying to stitch together public and private partnerships. Her job is to squeeze money out of companies, money and know-how, and link that with real public needs. Tell us about your partnership vision and work, and whether that includes the private sector or what you're thinking.
Sure. I really think EAT is it when it comes to the kinds of partnerships that we need for the future and in order to solve the challenges that all the panelists and the speakers earlier today have been talking so eloquently about. The kinds of partnerships that bring together the best of the best when it comes to the science community, that can bring policymakers to the table, that can bring key actors from the private sector to actually start to talk seriously about what are our constraints, where are they in the value chain, in the global food system, if you wish, and how can we build coalitions across different interest groups to be able to deal with the barriers, the constraints, the bottlenecks that exist. The unique thing about EAT is the very audacious attempt of doing that, of bringing these communities together across also these sectors of health and environmental sustainability, climate change, and food that rarely have spoken together in the past. And when you do that, you actually create the possibility of a lot more energy around the issues, a lot more pressure on decision makers to start moving forward and taking action. So my vision for partnerships is very much along the lines of what this amazing initiative is starting to look like. I mean, keep in mind, EAT started as an idea a year and a half ago with a few people like Gunhild in particular, perhaps, starting to talk about the need to make something happen. And last May in Stockholm, there was this incredible event. And I said there, and I've been to a lot of horrendous meetings in my life. This is not one of them, because you were actually able to produce that kind of can-do excitement and energy, not based on wishy-washy feelings, but based on the fact that we had the competences in the room that had the capacity to start addressing the issues. And then, from then, we're moving forward to try to bring more players in. We need everyone from the agricultural producers to the chefs that put the menus together in our restaurants, and everyone in between, to start talking seriously about, okay, how do we fix this incredibly complex food system that is, speaking as a representative of UNICEF, right now messing up our kids. Because that's what it's doing. It's messing up those kids that are not getting enough food and are hungry, that will go through their whole life stunted because they were not taken care of in their early years. We're messing up all those kids that are eating junk food, because that's what's on offer and that's what parents can afford, or that's what habit makes them do, and advertising, etc. And then finally, because the system is fundamentally unsustainable when it comes to the issues of climate change, biodiversity, etc., we're messing up the future for all kids if we're not able to address this incredibly complex challenge. So we need partnerships also in other areas, but they need to look sort of like this. And then we might be able to start tackling some problems.
And have you seen a partnership work in any field that excites you, that you're drawing lessons from, that you think you can emulate or do even better? Does something come to mind that is a wow achievement that you feel you could do in this area?
I think there are a lot of partnerships that have achieved some amazing things. CGIAR and the experience of the Green Revolution, although it created a lot of problems that we realized over time, it was still an incredible partnership to address chronic hunger in many parts of the world. We have now the Global Fund that is dealing with the health problems of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria. If you go back a few years, people had almost written off the possibility of addressing these kinds of diseases. Now, think about what people were thinking back around the year 2000 about the AIDS epidemic. What has been achieved through these partnerships, the Gavi initiative on vaccines, it's quite amazing. But I think we're here talking about something that is even more complex than dealing with these specific diseases or dealing with the challenge of vaccinating children all over the world. And so we need to be a bit more daring, and we need to bring to create the kind of setting where not least the business community, business leaders, CEOs, see that they have something to contribute and that they have a responsibility to contribute. I like very much what you said earlier about the whole corporate social responsibility topic. And that clearly is not enough anymore. What we need for the future is the concept of business worthiness. We need as societies to expect a new kind of behavior from business. Yes, it's absolutely about making money, but making money by actually solving some problems.
And Feike Sibesma, I didn't need to say your last name, I just wanted to try it, right? Was that close?
Your pronunciation is excellent.
You've already been introduced, CEO of DSM. I also loved what you were talking about, corporate responsibility not being activities, but part of the central business structure of the company. But being in the world of cattle lately, I thought you were going to mention your Clean Cow project. So I wanted to ask you about that, not just because my boys laugh when I talk about gassy cows, but this does seem to be a very real, big problem that correct me if I'm wrong, you're on the edge of maybe solving. Can you tell us just a little bit, and then we're going to go do a quick audience question.
Thank you. I will touch it very shortly and then place it in a bigger context. A Clean Cow is a project we have. Cows take care of 18% of all emissions of greenhouse gas via methane. And it is very relatively simple to reduce that to only a few percent, to have 90% reduction of their emissions by adding something to the feed, certain enzymes, which gives a different processing, and then you reduce it. Very simple. Do farmers want it? No. Why not? Because they have to pay for this, and they don't pay for the emissions right now. Do governments want to help me? No. Why? Because the farmers don't want it, and the farmers' lobby is very strong in most countries in the world. So great solution.
You've got a market problem, in other words.
Well, that is what you might say. We have a market problem. Great. Great product, solution for the world, but no market yet. Is it not a civilization problem we have? Many years ago, people who were more powerful than other people could easily say in our society, you work for me for free. That was called slavery. And that was common. And that was happening. And for a long time, nobody debated it. At a certain moment, civilization said, well, that's not what we want. In the history before, the more powerful people could say to the less powerful people, you play for me in the circus against the lions. And at that moment, nobody was accusing against this. Is it not a next step in our civilization that we do not accept that the more powerful people in the world let it happen that there are 1 billion people suffering in the world? Because the solutions are there. The big problem is not that we don't have solutions for energy. The big problem is not that we cannot make enough green and clean energy. Yeah, Siebesma, that is a problem. It's more expensive. No. Expensiveness is a matter of convention. If we still give 500 billion yearly subsidies to fossils, if you stop with that, the clean energies become immediately more attractive. If you look to the Clean Cow project you mentioned, if I look to what we are doing here in the United States with upgrading agricultural waste, if I see what we can do on nutrition, only a tiny little company as us, helping 21 million people, if 100 other companies will do that, see the scaling of it. What I think is that we all know what we need to do. What I think is that business and innovation provided a lot of the solutions. What I think is that we still accept that there is opposition against it, because some do not like to make healthier food. Some do not like to reduce the corn syrup in our food. Some do not like to work with other energies. And I even understand it, but I think it's a next step in our civilization that the people here in the panel, that the people here in the room just do not accept certain things. Like in our civilization, we went to other phases also, that at a certain moment, we did not accept certain things anymore. I plead for that.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to take an audience question then. Anybody care to ask? I think we have a minute or two. Yeah.
Livestock, and the fact that we can't afford the emissions that are coming from the livestock sector, and that we can't afford the land use that, or the water, or the potassium, or the nitrogen loss that is going to livestock, and the emissions coming from that.
It's true. It's working, microphone? Okay. It's true. Of course you can ask yourself, should we eat as much meat as we're doing? Or should we, at the end of the day, all eat in the whole world the same average amount of meat as the average American is doing? Sorry for all the Americans in the room. But that would be a disaster, of course, if we're doing that. However, we will eat some meat in the world. And that meat in the world is giving a great contribution, in negative sense, to our emissions in CO2, especially in forms from methane. And I think the solutions are there to reduce that. Let's do it. When I look now what we have done here in the United States, looking to agricultural waste, there's so much waste which the farmers put in big piles and burn it and creating CO2. We now took the waste and converted it into fuels with 90% CO2 reduction. We can make it cheaper even than normal gasoline. And we have looked further into the waste. There are proteins in the waste. We throw away, we burn. Why can we not upgrade it and make it available for human consumption? There are so many solutions. They're all there.
Thank you. We are out of time. I appreciate it. And let's leave the stage for our closing speaker.